Hello, welcome to this free interactive webinar. I want to talk to you today about what Ruby on Rails is. It's a term that you would have heard thrown around quite often by Reinteractive and other developers, and I wanted to explain a little bit about what Ruby on Rails is and how that might benefit you. So, at its core, Ruby on Rails is what we call an app development framework. So Ruby is a programming language. It's a very popular one used by programmers to develop web-based applications that are used every day. Rails is a way of writing Ruby so that it's written in a certain way. It's done because we want to increase the efficiency of development and the speed of development. All of these things are highly desirable. They end up with a better result for you, someone who's wanting that app developed, and for the developer themselves, because if they're developing faster and more efficiently, they're going to be happier and they're going to be producing things that are more desirable as well. So let me explain to you a little bit more about what a framework is. If you can imagine building a house, when you build a house, you have a lot of things that are in common from house to house. For example, everybody's got doors, everybody's got windows, there's a roof, there's walls, there's bricks. Now these things are arranged very differently from house to house, or at least substantially differently, but a lot of those elements are the same. For example, you're going to use exactly the same window frame as the guy next door or the guy down the street, and the tiles are going to be very similar. They might be a different color, but they're the same tiles, and the same with the bricks. They're the same. They might be a different color and a slightly different shape, but they're all bricks and they're all laid in exactly the same way to produce a house. So a programming framework is very similar. There's a bunch of modular units that we can use, which are going to be the same from application to application. And by using these, we increase the speed and efficiency of what we're doing. For example, there might be a module, and in Ruby on Rails, these are called gems, these code libraries. And there might be one that deals with, say, how a person logs into an application. Now, most applications have a login function. There's users that can access certain features that a non-user couldn't access. So it doesn't make sense to have to rewrite that every time you write an application. It's done once, and then we can reuse that for our own use. We can customize it. We can change certain things about it. We can make sure it's highly secure and all of that sort of stuff. But the actual module itself is the same. And that means that I'm going to save time if I'm the developer and writing that particular module, because I don't have to write all the things about it, just things that are specific to my application. It also means that another developer who's going to pick up this application tomorrow and help me to do some of the development or to add on to the development that I did 10 years ago will know already what that thing is and how it works. He doesn't have to refigure that. He doesn't have to rework that. So that's what's good about that. So there's other things like that we're going to use. For example, all applications use a database. Well, there's ways that we have to access that database. And so that is something which we can replicate from application to application. Then there's also ways that we want to store all that information and place it within our tree, within our directory, so that the next developer, or even myself picking it up years later, will know exactly where those things are from application to application. I don't have to know that other developer. He doesn't even have to leave me any notes about it, because I know that if it was written using Ruby on Rails, that it's going to be done in exactly the same way. And you understand then a little bit what the on Rails part of that title means. Ruby on Rails, Rails meaning it goes in a certain direction and it's going to follow that path. You know, you don't have to be concerned about, is it going to turn left or right here? Well, no, because the Rails are going to make sure it goes straight ahead. Okay, so let's answer another question. Why Ruby on Rails? There's lots of different development frameworks out there, a lot of them written using or for JavaScript, things like React and Angular that you would have heard quite a lot about. And these are great frameworks. They're ones that work very, very well and mostly for front-end type things, but there's some that apply to servers, that is the back end as well. Let's talk about why we use Ruby on Rails and why it's a benefit. So, as I said before, if you're using a framework, in particular Ruby on Rails, the developers are going to be happier. They're happier because they can code the things that are custom to that particular application. They don't have to rewrite the things that are already written, which means they're going to save time and they're going to use their mental expertise and their skill set to do that customized stuff, the things that are unique to your application. They can dream up and plan and work out the things that are unusual and the things that make your application unique. So that's going to make them happier. It also means they're not wasting time doing things which are frankly not all that interesting because they've done it 100 times before. So it's going to be a much more efficient thing to use. So you've got happier developers. When you've got happier developers, their output is going to be much greater, and it's probably going to be a little bit less bug prone if they're not, bored. They're interested in what they're doing. What does that mean for you as, say, an owner of the application or someone that's paying for development? It means that the cost is going to be less, should be less, because the developer speed is increased by using that framework. It also means that, ideally speaking, there's a lot less to fix up afterwards. No piece of software is perfect when it was written. Everything has bugs in it and does for years and years afterwards. So don't expect it to be bug-free, but we can decrease the number of bugs and mean that those bugs are handled more efficiently and rapidly if we're using a framework. So all of those reasons. So let's just summarize some of these things and maybe introduce some new ideas here. It's faster to build. Using Ruby on Rails, it's fast to build. And I'm talking of all frameworks here. Ruby on Rails is definitely one of the faster ones. The time from I've got an idea to let's deploy something now that's ready and usable is quite short and can be done in a matter of weeks, if not days, by a skilled senior developer. It's easy to maintain. As I said, a new developer picking up that application, or even one that hasn't touched it for a couple of years, can pick up an application, understand what's happening in it, and be ready to ship a new feature that same day. That's an ideal scene. Shouldn't take them days or even weeks, as it does happen in some cases, to understand how the code is written, how it's put together, how it's formatted, and why certain decisions have been made inside that code. Because those decisions are already pre-understood and are the same from application to application. Ruby on Rails is extremely well supported, has a very, very large community of users. All of those code libraries that I was talking about, the gems, they're also well maintained and updated from version to version, security patches, all of that sort of stuff. So Ruby on Rails itself is constantly being updated to make sure it adheres to the most current web standards, to make sure that it adheres to the most current and in front of security standards, because that's extremely important, and adding new features as we go. So there's major releases that happen very frequently with Ruby on Rails, and then minor security patches that happen throughout the year as well. Testing is pre-built in with Ruby on Rails. If you don't understand the concept of testing, it means when a developer builds or writes a particular feature within the application, he should test it to make sure that that particular feature itself works with several different types of cases built in, but also it doesn't break something else, which does happen. Working on this thing over here can sometimes make sure that something over there doesn't work as well as it should or breaks completely. So we have this built-in testing. That is, the program itself automatically runs some things. Let's say it's that login form that I was talking to you about. Well, the login form can be tested by a correct user input and incorrect user input, a user who's trying to input data which is designed to break the application. All of those sorts of cases can be pre-tested to make sure it works. Like if it's a date form, what are the various types of things someone might put into the date field? And do they come up with a correct error handling, or do we need to fix something there? All of that sort of stuff. So there's these things that are pre-baked into Ruby on Rails. So it sort of forces the developer to use these things correctly. As I said, next point, the performance is improved. When you have developers who enjoy what they're doing, like what they're doing, their output is a lot higher. So you get higher speed and efficiency. The developers enjoy doing what they're doing. This is a separate point, because if the developers don't enjoy it, they're not going to stick with it. And so you haven't got a framework or a programming language that's going to move into the future. So you need something that they're going to enjoy and want to use again. The framework is opinionated. Opinionated means that it causes or forces the developer to write in a certain way. It means that it's going to cause him to format his code in a way which is understandable to everybody that writes in Ruby on Rails. Certain pieces of code are going to be in certain places in the directory, and if you want to find that piece of code, you know exactly where to look for that piece of code. You don't have to go hunting for it or guess where it is, which is very, very important when you've got applications that are running thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of lines of code. You want to know where certain things are dealt with and how they're dealt with. Otherwise, it's an almost impossible task. The last point is the cost effectiveness. All of those earlier points that I just mentioned, everything that I just went over, means that it is cost effective to develop in Ruby on Rails, which is why large enterprises use Ruby on Rails. I'm talking companies or organizations that have teams of dozens of developers all working on a single application will use Ruby on Rails for all of the reasons that I just mentioned. It's also very, very efficient for a startup. That's somebody who might be just one person or a small group of people in their investors going, let's get this thing shipped and making some money. You want something that is highly cost effective to be able to do that, to start, doing the thing that it's supposed to do. Okay, so that's Ruby on Rails. I have definitely glossed over a lot of points there in order to do them as briefly as possible. If you have any questions, you can always contact me through the reinteractive.com website. Details are on the screen right now. Thank you.